This model that our culture has given us, it's broken. We're living in a chaotic time that's confusing, and we're trying to make sense of it. Get the job where you're making enough money that's socially accepted, get the house, get the car. Money does not equal happiness. Money does not equal well-being. It wasn't a complete 180-degree turn, but things started to shift. We need spaces where we can let our guards down, where we can be seen, where we can witness other people that are going through similar things. Hello, and welcome to the Human Experience Podcast. Welcome to episode 1. I'm your host, Blake, going to be guiding this journey that is this podcast that I am so excited to finally be embarking on. But for today, it's just me. No guest, just me. A chance for the listener to get to know the host as we build this, really what is a culture together. So without further ado, let's get into it. So my name is Blake Chalfant. I'm 23 years old, from the US. I'm currently in the US, although for many of these podcasts, I probably will not be in the US. I don't have a current home. However, I have different places that I get to feel like I'm at home. And one of those is North Carolina, where my family is from, which is where I am currently coming from today in this podcast. So my life began here, actually, in North Carolina, in this exact town. And growing up, I was very much living in the normal American family, living in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina, in a stable home with 2 heteronormative parents that loved me, with an older brother. Grew up playing sports. I was very much... It's funny because when I get asked this question, actually, what was my childhood like? What was my upbringing like? There's 2 different answers to that. There's what was my childhood and upbringing like in terms of how I was feeling internally and what I looked like externally. I was the classic example of the person who externally looks like they're thriving, internally is crumbling. Externally crushing, internally crumbling is a good way to say that. And so, growing up, we moved to Tennessee when I was about 8 years old. And, growing up, soccer was a huge part of my life, hanging out with friends, watching all the movies that we grew up with, Star Wars, playing the video games, doing all the American youth things, not having to worry about if I was going to have food on my table and all those kinds of struggles that I think the I guess you could say middle upper class don't necessarily have to go through. And then in Tennessee, went to elementary school there and, was doing okay, I think. Was doing all right. And then by the time middle school hit, I had come from more of an alternative elementary school. And before then, up till about grade 5. And so then middle school was really the first time where I was in this big public school setting with kids from all these different schools feeding into this one bigger school. And that was when I really started to lose myself, which I think for everyone at that point, which is around age, 12, when, the identity is really coming online. We're searching for who we are. We're looking outside of ourselves in our peer groups to find out who are we? How do we stack up against our peers? What do we have that they don't have? All these things that, subconsciously we're kind of figuring out, okay, who is this person that people call Blake? And so for me, middle school was a time of becoming someone new. I think I looked around based on all of the social norms on pop culture, what was accepted, what wasn't accepted, and said to myself, okay, I'm going to become all of those things that earn this kind of acceptance and this level of belonging that I was searching for. And so, I guess you could say what I believe is that we all have an essence. We all have this core piece of who we are, and that's unique to everyone on an individual level. And it kind of has nothing to do with our environmental upbringing. It's this place within us that exists beneath all of those other surface level layers that get added on throughout our life. And so middle school was when I really disconnected from that place within myself, and I became the product of my environment in a big way. I was always the person who said the right things, entertained the right people, made the right jokes, was always going with the flow, was always down for whatever, never created drama, was very much a people pleaser, never really spoke my truth when there was a potential that my truth was going to interfere with what the group wanted, So very much abandoned myself, what I needed, what I desired, what I was feeling, and became a huge product of my environment. And I got damn good at it. I got really good at it. I was fully chameleon and, was crushing it. I think externally would have been like, man, he's so popular. He's really crushing the whole social hierarchy thing. He's pretty good looking. He's athletic. Wow. He's got it going on. And I would say this continued on until I was, it continued on for the rest of middle school into high school. And, high school really kind of soccer star, and was definitely in the cool crowd, had a beautiful girlfriend. So externally was freaking on top of the world. And then college was coming. And by the way, during this, school, I was always pretty good at school. I got the good enough grades for the test and stuff. I was mostly A, some B student. And, but never found the thing that I was really passionate about. Never had a subject in school that I was just all in on. And, so it was very much going through the motions of the school system, the educational system, and just memorizing the facts to pass the test. I was never a reader outside of school or anything like that. Very, very disconnected from any sort of creative outlets growing up. Very much athletic in the cool guy group, hanging out with the girls, partying a ton for sure. And all this continued up until college. So for college, I went to the state school in Tennessee that everyone goes to from my county in high school. This was where my brother was at. So it was very much just this next step. It was just the clear next step, right? I wasn't taking any risks. I wasn't going out of state. I was just going to the state school that everyone else goes to. And as I look back on my life, I see it was very much a life of following what the norm was in terms of the next step. I do this next. Now I'll do this next because that's what everyone else around me does. It was what I call the path of the hamster wheel, right? Just running on that wheel and not even really being aware of where I'm going, kind of being in the passenger seat of my own life. And so it was, okay, I'm going to go to this school, this state school where my brother goes. I'm going to join his fraternity. It was very much, you can continue that loop, and I'd probably end up moving back to the same town that I grew up in, going to the same high school football games that I grew up going to. Thankfully, I broke that loop a little bit earlier than that. So anyway, going to college, and at this time, my mom did grow up. I did grow up with a mom who was very spiritual, and I wasn't forced to go to church or anything, even though the town that I lived in growing up was extremely religious. In the suburbs of a wealthy southern town, it was extremely religious. And actually, for a long time there, I really tried to be religious in that sense of it, going to a church and reading the Bible. And I convinced myself pretty well that I was all in on it. It was definitely more of a defense mechanism. Maybe defense mechanism isn't the right way of saying that. It was a coping strategy of belonging, because I felt like an outcast because my family didn't go to church and I wasn't really Christian and whatnot. And so, yeah, in my later year of high school, senior year, going into my freshman year in college, I definitely did start to dabble a little bit in the things that my mom were doing my entire life. A little bit of meditation, reading some books. Actually, the first book, for any of you who are wondering what books, Many Lives, Many Masters was the first book. That was when I was she gifted that to me during my senior year graduation party. And for those of you who don't know about that book is basically about this doctor, I think from the University of Virginia, who was doing hypnotherapy with his with his clients who had, major issues in their life that they just weren't working. And so I think at some point, it's been a while since I read it, but at some point he kind of was at a loss for what to do and went to hypnotherapy, and basically these crazy past lives started just happening. People just started telling these crazy stories, and the dots are being connected, the disorder, what they were going through in their current life with the past life stuff, and disorder is starting to be healed, lifelong issues. And basically this book is a compilation of all of these different case studies with his clients. So for anyone who's interested, I highly recommend it. It's amazing. And there's no doubt in my mind. It's hard to read that and not believe that we have lived many lives. So anyway, so then college comes around and I go balls deep in the fraternity party scene. I mean, just all in. And it was the same kind of pop culture, social hierarchy stuff as high school, just on a whole different level. And just with different people, and going from senior year to that, you start out at the bottom again. It's so funny how that works, right? Like we get to senior year, we think we're on top of it, we're the shit. And then we go into freshman year in that way in college, and we're back at the bottom, and we have to play these different roles. Now, freshman year in college, we're playing the role of like sucking up to the upperclassmen and doing what we can to earn their approval. And then once we're a senior, we do the opposite. We're the shit now. We don't need your approval. Now you do it to us. It's funny. Those kind of roles of fitting in our current society. Yeah, I mean, I was all in the party scene, in the fraternity scene, at my college. And by the way, this is not some small college with a little fraternity. This is like the SEC, these southern big state schools. With the Greek life there is like, the biggest in the country. I was kind of in the specific one of the, the fraternity that I was in was one of the biggest on the campus as well. And so, yeah, I was kind of in the heart of that world, really went to that far polar extreme for sure, which totally has informed my life. And I think the empathy that I have for so many people and the understanding for what the youth is kind of growing up in. I mean, I was all in. Going out multiple times a week, getting hammered on the weekend. If I didn't go home with a girl, then according to my environment, it was a failure of a night. Getting high all day, every day, not a exaggeration on that point at all. I was completely in it. And, wasn't really passionate about my school at all. I went into my freshman year undecided, and, I felt like I had a great group of friends. I did meet some actually incredible people that freshman year in college, but for the most part, I had 55 people in my pledge class, and we were all friends with quotation marks, for people who are just listening without the video. And then later into my freshman year in college, there was this kind of span of like a week, and within that week, I really was brought to my knees, and this was kind of my rock bottom moment. It was a night where there was a lot of partying going on. It was like this crazy brain fog. The curtain was completely torn off, and I was seeing everything clearly for what it was. And it was hard to look at, and I needed to look at that. And on that night, I realized just how unhappy I really was with my life, how deeply unfulfilled I was, how disconnected from myself I was and what I truly desired in my life, how I wanted to live my life. I mean, it really was this hamster wheel that I was on, which was sometimes go to class, smoke a lot of weed, get really fucked up on the weekend, and have fun with your friends while doing it. And that's about it. Not thinking about anything else in life, not thinking about what I was really feeling. I mean, how can I actually even notice what I'm feeling if I'm so disassociated with all of these drugs and whatnot? The kink in the hose was released, and I saw everything for what it really was. And yeah, I feel like I had moments of kind of seeing that before, but never fully ripping off the Band-Aid. And that was the moment where the Band-Aid was just torn off. And after that, I couldn't go back. I couldn't go back to the same way that I was living. And so after that, I stopped going out as much. I was still smoking some weed, and it wasn't a complete 180-degree turn, but things started to shift. I couldn't go out as much. I noticed the people that I had thought I was friends with, but really my friendship was completely built on just going out and getting fucked up with each other. And there wasn't actually a genuine friendship there. And then my second semester in that freshman year, I dropped out of the fraternity, started rock climbing, going outside, hanging out with different people. And then COVID happened. And what I will say about that chapter that's important for me, that I think is a common part of people's awakening journeys. I don't like saying the word awakening, but that's what it is. Change, transformation, whatever you want to call it, is for me, being a people pleaser, being someone who's really has lived my life up until that point for my environment, what my environment thought of me. It was really hard when I was trying to change. I didn't want to go out as much. It was really hard to be strong in that around the people that knew me by the Blake who always went out, who knew me by the person that I was trying to change from. And so maybe I'd make up excuses why I wasn't going out, or probably went out a few times just because I felt pressured in that way. But that was really hard, being strong in that. And so I think it was a blessing in a way that COVID happened, because I got to have some space from that world. But I think it's a really common part of people's stories that a huge obstacle to change is the people that we're surrounded by, and because of who they associate ourselves to be, who they know us to be. And then because of who they know us to be, they have an expectation, and we feel like we need to fill that expectation of who they think that we are and how we're supposed to be, versus just being who we are regardless of what people think of us, and then allowing people who really appreciate who we are and who we're striving to be to surround us and support us, and those people becoming our friends. So anyway, COVID happens. I go home, kind of fast forwarding. That was an important part, so I'm going to fast forward around these next parts. But basically, I ended up transferring schools to a different school where I really didn't know anyone, and it felt like a fresh start. You can change in your current environment, and there's something empowering about that. And sometimes it really is helpful to just get away and kind of find a fresh start with new people, where you get to try on these different outfits of who you are. And so this next chapter, I was in Chattanooga, and I was coming from frat boy, growing up in the South, drinking all the time, but more of that frat boy archetype. And then I went 180 and went into hippie archetype, kind of, and really was doing that. I got into a different music scene, was hanging out with different people, and I was definitely dabbling in more spirituality. I started meditating more, but it was in this kind of hippie mentality. And to me, I look back and it was like a costume party, right? So my freshman year in college, I was wearing the frat boy costume. And then after that experience, my rock bottom, I said, okay, this isn't who I am. So who am I? And I went out searching, and I tried on a different costume. And that was my second year in college. And that was trying on the hippie clothes and wearing the tie-dye and growing my hair out and wearing the beanie and all of that. And I'm not saying that either of those are necessarily wrong, but at the end of the day, doing this whole costume party thing, we're not actually wearing the costume of who we are. And trying on different costumes, I think, can point us in the direction of who we are, and maybe we find different pieces to the costume that actually feel true to us. But at the end of the day, we're still wearing someone else's costume. We're still wearing the costume of that tribe. And so for me, this chapter in Chattanooga, the second year of college, was a step closer towards myself, but I wasn't quite there. I was working a job, had an awesome girlfriend, and then after that first year, I was going into the summer. after my sophomore year in college in Chattanooga. And this is another story, so I'm going to tease it, but I'm not going to go into it. I had a crazy synchronistic connection with this person who lived out on the West Coast, and she was giving me a session. She's kind of a counselor, whatnot, life guidance person. Much more to share on that. And she told me basically that she thought that I belonged out on the West Coast, and that just in terms of what I was looking for in life and the kind of, I find that whether it's a relationship, a person, like a relationship, a place, a job, whatever, certain things make us feel expansive, right? It makes us feel open. You can breathe into it, and certain things almost suck the life out of us, and they feel contracted and small and closed down. And she was just telling me how the place that I was in life in Chattanooga at that school, and it didn't have enough space for me. It was too contracted for me. And so one thing led to another thing. She connected me with people out in Washington, and we had one Zoom call. And after that Zoom call, and with a lot of trust in my heart, I decided to abandon my life in Chattanooga and drive across the country from North Carolina out to Washington State, camp in these random people's backyard for the summer, purely because for whatever reason, it felt so right. And logically, on so many levels, it was so wrong. I was leaving a relationship that really, it wasn't perfect back then, though. It felt it was great. And I was leaving a job. I had just gotten promoted to like manager and bartender at this restaurant. That was pretty cool. And I was in school. I was in school in Chattanooga. So why would I do that? I didn't know if I was going to keep going to school. I didn't even have a job lined up out west. I didn't even have that much money in my bank account. For whatever reason, it felt so right. And I think when I look at my life, that was kind of the first decision of deeply following my inner yes, of deeply following what felt right, even when externally it didn't really make sense. And so I did that, and basically what ended up happening is the people that I was living with were very much all in on doing their own healing work, self-improvement, self-development, deeper sense of spirituality. And that was exactly what I was looking for. And I didn't even realize how fully that's what I was looking for. But it was so perfect in so many ways. And that being out there in the communities that they were in, I ended up meeting some people that I'm still best friends with today. And that was kind of the second domino that fell, that just, my path just started to unfold. From that point, I spent that summer in Washington. I found an amazing school in San Francisco that allowed me to finish online, and also I was studying exactly what I wanted to study, which was psychology, but more in a cutting edge way, not the outdated psychology. And so after that summer, I ended up moving down to Portland, Oregon for a few months. And during this whole time, I was doing school online. And then after that, I moved to Santa Cruz, California. So much to unpack with each of these moves, but again, it was very much going off of a win of where I felt like I was being called. And that's a whole podcast in itself of what does that even mean, following where I'm feeling called, because it's so much more than a pro-con checklist that I make in my brain where it feels good. And so I ended school in Santa Cruz, and then when I graduated, I moved home. And it is important to say that during this whole time of me leaving Chattanooga to finishing school in Santa Cruz, which I ended up finishing college in 3 years because it was a sped up program, which was perfect because I wanted to get the heck out of college and be done. During this time, which was about a 1.5 year span, I was all in on my healing work. I mean, the veil had been lifted of seeing all the different patterns, all the different places in myself that needed attention, and I went all in. At times a bit much, where I could have paused to smell the roses, so to speak. And during this time, I was really dabbling in the worlds of plant medicine, which again is a whole other episode. But has been a huge part of my path in, coming back home to who I am, shedding these outdated layers. And it's a big part of my life for sure, and has helped me immensely. And although it's not for everyone, it definitely has been a big part of my path, and I'm very grateful for it. And so during this time of finishing school out on the West Coast and whatnot, was going all in on my own internal work and finding myself, finding a more true version of myself, and was getting very curious and fascinated about actually developing tools to help other people. And so for those that are interested in what I was actually learning, a lot of somatic experiencing, internal family systems, trauma work. Those were kind of the big pillars of what I was deeply fascinated by, and actually what I was learning in my bachelor program as well. So graduate school, moved back home just because I didn't know exactly if I wanted to be out in Santa Cruz anymore. I didn't know what was next for me. That fall, because I finished in September of 2022. Sorry, 2020. Yeah, 2022. I moved back home, back to North Carolina, and I started working a job at a restaurant while I also started working with clients for free just to get experience and, just to get experience in working with people. And then that spent the fall at home. And then that next, just January, I left to go to Brazil with a dear teacher of mine to spend almost 2 weeks in the Amazon with an indigenous tribe, learning their ways, their culture. And then after that, I spent the first 6 months of that year, 2023, traveling South America. I was in Brazil for a month. I ended up going to Peru, Mexico, Guatemala, and ended in Costa Rica. And then after that, came back home, and that feels good for now. There's more things that I could say. I know we're in 2024. But throughout that time, traveling and whatnot, I was seeing clients. So now I am working with mostly young men around ages 16 to 22, although I'm open to working with everyone. So I do individual counseling, mentoring sessions. And I also have been writing a book throughout that time, since I came home from school, actually, in 2022. So it's been about 2 years. Just came out. You can get your copy on Amazon, on my website, The Unseen Way, which basically is a book about my life and all the lessons and all the hardships, and shining a light on the pieces within our culture growing up in today's world that are outdated and are not working, which is a huge part of what I am inspired to share on this podcast. I really hope that this podcast is a space for people who are transitioning in life, who are going through their own sort of awakening, or who are searching for more but don't know what that exactly is. That this space can be a culture that we create together, that is a space of awakening, of self-discovery, of asking these deeper questions in life, of learning how to actually think, learning how to lead our own life, right? What I did when I left Chattanooga and went across the country was kind of the first time where I went against the grain of our modern culture and the model that has been created that so many of us are stuck in, right? Go to school, get the good enough grades, go to a good enough college, go to class, join the friend group, have the friends, fit in, get good enough grades so you get the internship, get a good enough internship so you'll get a good enough job after school, get the job where you're making enough money that's socially accepted, get the house, get the car, find the wife, check all these boxes that have been fed to us. And the thing that's missing about that is finding yourself and what you deeply desire in life and what you deeply are feeling called to, right? when we look at the value system within our culture and what's accepted and what we care about and what people look for, a sense of self in connection to who we are is not nearly at the top of that list. Deep fulfillment, passion, purpose, these are things that are kind of being left in the past because our culture doesn't actually value them. And so the path that I have been on has really been trying to put those values at the top of my list of I'm going to live a life that I'm connected to. I'm going to live a life that I am excited about and that there is a sense of aliveness in that. And guess what? It hasn't been easy all the time. It's been challenging, working against the grain of what people expect of me. Other people's judgments. What the heck are you doing with your life? He's just this crazy kid who's traveling and doesn't know what he's really doing and growing his hair out and playing the guitar, right? But at the end of the day, I think this model that our culture has given us is not working anymore. It's broken. And when I say it's broken, what I mean is that it's not conducive to health and well-being in a holistic sense. Maybe it makes money, and I have nothing against money. And actually, that's a topic I'm super inspired to talk about because, look, I want to make a ton of money in such a good way that feels in right relationship to myself and to the world, because I think money is just opportunity, and who doesn't want more opportunity and freedom in life? However, as we see again, money does not equal happiness. Money does not equal well-being, right? I think what does equal that is many things. But one big piece is a connection to our internal landscape. So many people today are living completely disassociated from our internal worlds and what we are feeling, what our internal worlds are saying to us, right? And to me, trying to live our life completely externally and with our brain power, with our cognitive capacity is like it's like trying to walk with one leg. To me, it is that big of a deal. And so, the path that I'm so inspired by and what I'm looking forward to bringing in this podcast is giving a space to advocate for the internal world and actually helping people navigate the internal world. Tools, frameworks, different ways of framing what's happening and really shifting the narrative, right? Especially as men, right? We've been told that we're not supposed to feel. We're not supposed to be vulnerable with each other. That's a sign of weakness. We're supposed to always have our shit together. I mean, I can't tell you how broken that is on so many levels and how that is taking us to the polar opposite side of what it means to thrive and be healthy. We need spaces to share what we are going through, what we feel. We are all going through something, especially at this moment on the earth. The fact of it is, we're living in a chaotic time that's confusing and we're trying to make sense of it. So many people don't trust the news anymore. We're being fed different stories on different sides, whether it's, politics, etc. Social media companies are trying to hijack our attention. It's not an easy time to be alive right now. And we're all going through something. What I'm seeing is that there's so many people who are the same way that I had my experience in my freshman year, are waking up to the life that they are living and how unhappy they are inside of it, how unfulfilled they are inside of it. But we need a container for that, right? What happens when you have that kind of experience and you have no one to tell about it? It's extremely isolating. You wonder why you're the only one who's going through that. And we need spaces where we can let our guards down, where we can be seen, where we can witness other people that are going through similar things. Because we all are struggling in some way, shape, or form. I still go through massive processes. It's a part of being human. We need to get rid of this narrative that it means that there's something wrong with you. It means you need to get on SSRIs, or you're broken, or whatever it is. It's being human. We are full spectrum human beings. We experience everything: sadness, loneliness, shame, rage, fear, guilt, happiness, joy, gratitude, ecstasy. we are full spectrum human beings, we need to start acting like that. And we need to start implementing into our culture an awareness around that. Like, we need to really embody that. Embodying that in how we relate with each other, though, right? And the thing is that we weren't taught how to do that. And that's the problem. It's like learning how to be vulnerable, learning how to receive someone else as being vulnerable with you, how to relate in that way. It's a skill, right? It's not something that we're born with. We need to learn how to do that. And to learn how to do that, we need to, I think a big part of that is experientially feeling what that feels like to be in relationship with someone who does know how to do that. It's like we're passing the torch of these skills, So ideally, we would be growing up with mentors in our life, older men, older women who are holding these skills, who are holding these ways of being. And by their interactions with us, we learn how to do them ourselves. So I'm going to start to come to a close. But what I'm deeply inspired by, which many of you, when you hear this, will call bullshit. Your ego will say, this isn't me. Maybe other people, but this isn't me. Is that we all, 100% of human beings on planet Earth, we all have a unique essence to us that no one else can replicate because it is only you. And you were born with that. And inside of that are gifts to share with the world. And these gifts, only you can share. No one else can do them for you. And you will not be able to access these gifts, uncover them, share this unique essence with the world by living someone else's life, by living the life that our culture has modeled for us. This is something that comes from unpeeling those layers, of shedding those layers that aren't actually you, that someone else gave to you, that someone else told you to do. The life that your parents told you should live, right? And I think on that journey of peeling back those layers and connecting more and more with that place within us that lives beneath all the other layers that have been given to us over time, the story of who we are, within that lives passion, lives purpose, lives fulfillment. Because as we're connecting with that place within us, we're also going to start expressing from that place within us, right? And so the first step is connection to that place. And the second step is sharing that place with the world. And so that can look like a business, that can look like music, that can look like artwork, that can look like the way that you show up with the people in your life. Just the way you carry yourself, the words that you say, the quality of how you say the words, right? Everything is going to change. And so I often think about this like a tree, right? The roots of the tree being that connection to who we are, and the branches of the tree being the different expressions of that place within us. And so as we begin connecting with the tree, as we begin connecting with the roots of our tree, inevitably the branches are going to start to change to reflect those roots. And I think that is the purpose of all of life and all of humans. Like you can say we have a purpose, but I think actually it's more broad than that. And I think we all have the same purpose, and that purpose is to continue to connect deeper and deeper with the roots of who we are. Not the roots of who we've been told to be, but the roots of who we are that were there the moment we took our first breath in this life. And to begin expressing from that place, right? You can think about a flower and blooming, right? That image of the flower blooming, like that is to me the journey of being human too. It is the journey of blooming, fully blooming in who we are, right? So I wanted to leave that with you all. Everything that I'm sharing, this is the story of who I am. This is the story of what I feel deeply passionate about, and hopefully will be a reflection of the podcast. This episode, you could say, are the roots, and all of the different episodes after this will hopefully be the branches of this tree, the reflections of this core foundation of what I'm wanting to hold, of what I'm wanting to create. And so my intention is to have a really tight-knit community, people who are engaging lots with this content. You know, I'd much rather have a very tight, close-knit community of people than have a million listeners who I don't feel intimate with, you know. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. Again, my name is Blake Chalfant. This is the Human Experience podcast. I'm so excited to be here with you all, to be sharing. My plan is to do one weekly episode, having guests, also doing more solo episodes. My podcast will be on all platforms, all the main podcast platforms, as well as YouTube. And if you're on YouTube, leave a like and subscribe. If you're on Spotify or other channels, platforms, rate the show, share it with some friends. It really helps my show grow. It's going to help me get different guests on. It's going to help sustain this podcast and ultimately elevate the entire show to new heights. So please, all of the support for the show is welcome and so appreciated. Thank you so much for tuning into the episode, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.